Welcome everybody to Tights Frame of Mind episode 37. It is me, Pantyhose King, and with me is always
The Commodore.
yes. And few things that I'd like to mention. We did an episode last time about AI and advertising with particular companies like Glamory. Um, People are getting fooled. I have actually heard people say, I ordered it and it's not like this. And then I told them, well, that's because it's AI. And they're like, oh, well, thank you for that useful information. Like they were seriously like they had no idea. So I want to again warn people, especially for Glamory right now, because they seem to be a huge culprit of this. Don't believe what you're seeing. The models that you're seeing are not real people. They're pastiche. The pantyhose you're seeing are not real pantyhose. They're pastiche of pantyhose. And you're not going to get like you're not going to get that brief underwear that the male model model in quotes purportedly has, like where it's like a perfect boxer brief, or not boxer brief, just like a perfect like brief. And then
Hmm.
it's just, and they keep using the same dude's face, and it's like the same, like kind of just eh, like his face doesn't change because they can't like replicate the actual smile of the person because he doesn't exist. So I just want to warn everybody out there about that. But today we're going to be doing something a little more, dare I say, intimate. We're going to be discussing Pantyhose origin stories. I've got some people who have submitted theirs to me for the show. I will be reading on their behalf. My gloves are too hot. Take them off. And we're going to even hear from Commodore and myself, although I will be last because you guys have heard mine before if you've listened to my episodes with Kathy on Strictly Anonymous, and Lord knows I've babbled on about my own origin stories before this. So mine's the least interesting, I think, as far as just you've heard it before. But will you
I'm
want to
glad you
start?
acknowledged that.
Huh?
Said I'm glad that you acknowledged it, even though you're one of the most boring people that we have right
I think so. I think so. I think I'm
now.
dull as dishwater. I think.
No,
Like,
absolutely.
that's nice of you to say that too. It's nice of you to point it out. I did
You're
miss you,
so welcome.
Commodore. Huh?
I said you are so welcome.
I missed you, Commodore. I missed your kind-hearted flirting and your
And
warmth and
wittiness.
your
Yes.
wittiness.
Yes. Of
And
course.
but
Of
I
course.
wore black pantyhose today in your honor, right? Because I know that's your jam. Black
That's the
pantyhose is
jam.
it's your jam. So speaking of jam, will you want to give us your origin story about how you came to discover pantyhose and sort of how it evolved over the years?
Honestly, I want to hear from our fans.
You do? Okay, well we
I
can
would
jump right
definitely
into
want to
it.
hear from the fans first.
Well, and
I think that's what's more important.
speaking of fans, I'm going to do some shout outs for some new patrons that we have. Excuse me if I butcher it. We've got Sweet Trom, thank you for joining. We got Jason, thank you for joining. Um, and then not joining a few days later. Maybe we can do something better. I'm not sure. Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Omsafilo, and thank you, Nancy. So those are the people who, while we were in between shows, they joined up, and we appreciate the support. And we remind everybody that the show can't really happen without your support. So it's definitely appreciated, and thank you again. So,
A lot of ums there.
huh?
A lot of ums there.
Um, I would like you to suck my toe. Okay, so we're gonna
So
go
many
to,
ums.
huh?
So
Huh?
many ums. So
So many
many.
ums.
Yeah.
Listen, if you want a professional Commodore, go buy one. They sell them on the streets all the time. Professional podcasters are everywhere. You live in all sorts of places. I mean, I know that you've been all around the United States. There's got to be a crop of charming pantyhose wearing co-hosts that you could have your pick from. And
Actually,
um,
funny you mentioned that. I have a few people that actually want to co-host
really,
future episodes. Yeah, they
well,
actually reached out to me.
that's news to me, and I'm glad that I'm hearing about it on the air as opposed to off the air, which would be totally profesh. but I'm open to
Well, I
that.
mean,
Just
who other than our fans should hear about it?
I
Of
think
course, our
so.
fans should hear about it.
And I mean, and I'm as open to that as the Commodore is to sleeping with me. So there we go. So that's where I'm gonna go. So
Oh,
oh
yeah, I'm gonna count.
okay. How
Starting
about
now, I'm counting.
how about you watch your mouth? I can put you on mute. You know I can mute you, right? I can mute you and I
That's
can mute
fine.
you.
I'm still gonna count.
How tight is your anus that like because I know that the anal retention, like just that
I
so
like to
if you
call
don't
it
write the
Bro CD.
huh?
I like to call it Bro CD.
Bro CD?
It's yep, Bro CD.
Right. I call it tight sphincter syndrome, where if you don't write that down, you're like, eh,
That's going towards it.
that was an exemplary. Anyway, back to the things at hand. Okay, so this is from O. That's the name of the person who submitted it. So here we go. O says, I think I've always had an attraction to hose. I remember being very young, maybe 4 or 5, playing under the table at family functions and noticing the women's legs and feet. It was the late 70s, so women wore hose pretty much all the time. Obviously, it wasn't anything sexual at that time, but I was very drawn to the material. I remember my mom and aunts kind of yelling at me and telling me to stop touching their legs. It sounds creepy now, but that's what I first remember. And, I think that's great because there is nothing bad about little kids doing it. We're discovering ourselves. So I don't think that that's creepy personally. I think it's just a discovery phase. Correct? Right? Don't
Yeah,
you agree?
no, I mean, that's how a lot of people's origins start is basically at home.
Yep. Fast forward to when I was 10 or 11. On a side note, I grew up in a house with my mom, stepdad, sister, 4 years older, and my stepbrother, 5 years older. Both sister, both sisters took dance classes, and my mom took aerobics. They both wore black tights for that. I think my first quote unquote theft was from my sister's drawer. So was mine too, I think. I took a pair of her tights and wore them in my room and, quote, took care of business, then put them back on. As soon as I did the same with a pair of my mom's, after a few incidents, I graduated to a pair of my mom's pantyhose, and I remember the brand and style Givenchy body gleamers. Those sound fancy. I've never heard of
Hmm.
that. I remember liking the pantyhose material the way more than the tights material. I was hooked. And I did mention to you can be graphic if you want to. You don't have to say things like take care of business. It's okay. But he said he'd rather keep it relatively clean. And I said, oh. So anyway, so I started regularly borrowing my mom's pantyhose, and then I took a pair with no intention of giving them back as I'd cut out the gusset to make it easier and more comfortable to jerk off with. Victory. I did it. I feel like I got there. I'm sure you can relate to the difference between the feeling between pulling them down under the package to not having that pressure there when the package is through an easy access hole. I can. So, of course, my mom found them under my bed when changing my sheets. Great hiding place, huh? Damn, that's where I hid stuff too. Teenagers are so like dumb. They're just not good at just like you finish doing it and you're like, I'm just gonna put it under my bed. Just gonna hide it there. That'll be it's the easiest place. Nobody will find it. I got caught that way too. She was actually more mad that I took them from her and ruined them than what I was actually doing with them. I think I was 13 now. She took them and told me to stop, and I did for a while. As you know, this doesn't go away, so a few months later, I started doing it again with my sister's dance tights. Of course, I got caught with them again because my sister noticed a couple pairs missing and told my mom, and my mom knew exactly where to look. Oh, that's still in the same place. Both, both my mom and my sister were pretty angry. My mom sat me down to talk with me about it. I think I was 13. All the usual questions. Was I gay? Did I want to dress up like a girl? I'm sure she would have asked if I identified as a girl if that were a thing back then. I answered no to these questions. At this point, I think my mom realized I wasn't going to stop and actually did something really cool for me. She bought me my own pantyhose and tights for me, with me promising I would stop taking hers and that I would wash them. I was doing my own laundry at that point. I can remember exactly what she bought me: 3 pairs of nude, no nonsense, sheer to waist. I know, yuck, but I didn't know back then. And 2 pairs of black danskin tights. That's a progressive ass mom right there. And I would say 13-year-old me would have been like thrilled over the moon for like no nonsense, right? Like, I don't care. You could have given me sheer text. I don't know if I'd have been happy with that, but anything but sheer text, and I'd have been happy because sheer text is like wearing a potato sack. Sorry, we love sheer text here at Tight Frame of Mind. We love them dearly. Sponsor. She told me not to wear them anywhere but in my room, as she never told my stepdad or stepbrother as far as I know. So, of course, I didn't listen to her and started wearing the black tights under my jeans the next winter, which I continued to do throughout high school. I also started working part time when I was 13 and started buying my own hose and tights and built up a pretty good stash before I went to college. When I went to college, I stopped wearing completely as I had a roommate my first 2 years. I purged my stash before leaving college. Oh, it's the worst. I always feel bad when people tell me about purges. I'm like, you're gonna
Hmm.
regret it. You're gonna regret it. I moved into an apartment my third year and started building my own stash again. I've never had a problem buying hosiery in person as others have. It was never an obstacle for me. At this point, I would wear hose and tights under my pants whenever I got the chance. To back it up though a bit, I never had a girlfriend in high school in my first 2 years of college. So I finally managed a girlfriend in my third year of college. My wearing initially stopped. After a couple of months of dating, I built up the courage to tell her, but limited it to say I liked wearing black tights. This was in the early 90s, and if you remember, grunge fashion was popular, and one of the styles, for men even, was to wear black tights under ripped jeans. She seemed okay with this, and I started wearing black tights under ripped jeans. I really cared about her, and I wanted to be as open as I could, so I decided to tell her I also liked wearing pantyhose. It did not go well, and soon after she dumped me. I was pretty devastated, purged my stash again, and swore off
Mm.
ever wearing tights or hose. Man, my sympathy goes out to anybody who's been in that situation. Like, that's rough. That's rough. I mean, to break up with somebody over that is, I think, probably one of the stupidest things you could do.
It's
Um,
personal. It's personal preference.
it's personal preference, but I mean, is that really like that's a line in the sand? Like that you're like, I
It
cannot.
could for some women it is, man.
Women with like lobotomies. I mean, I don't know. I think it's the sign of a unenlightened, maybe simple-minded woman, perhaps.
I would just say that there are women out there that don't want their man dressing in attire that would normally be seen on a woman.
I get it. I just think that they're wrong and they should shut up. That's all I'm saying. No, I mean, First Amendment and all that, blah, blah, blah. But shut up, ladies who think that. Anyway, I had a few other girlfriends through college, and I never went back to wearing until I graduated. Shortly after graduating, I was offered a job in my degree by my mom's cousin's husband in the Cleveland area and moved out there. I rented an apartment with no roommates and began building my stash, and started wearing again as much as possible at home and underpants, but not in public. This was in 98. I'm sorry, this was 1996, not 1998. At this point, I started shaving my legs, which, of course, makes a huge difference in the feel and look. I also started experimenting with going out in shorts and hose, limiting the outings to wearing skin tone hose in the evenings. I met my wife in June 1998. Another purge. Oh, and I completely stopped wearing. We got married in 2000. Shortly after, I started wearing again in secret and built up a small stash. Oh, the amount of money, the amount of money. I should say that throughout all this, wearing was sexually stimulating, and I jerked off frequently while wearing them, as if I needed to tell you this. I continued wearing what I could in secret until through 2004. Soon after we started dating that winter, she realized tights really turned me on, so she knew on some level I had a fetish. But in 2004, I decided to tell her I liked wearing tights too. It did not go well. She started crying, and I felt horrible making her feel this way. She asked me all the same questions my mom did, all of which I said no to. She did not understand at all. It was clear that she didn't accept it, and I didn't want to see me in them, so I continued wearing secretly. She confided in a close friend about whose ex-husband came out as gay for her support. To her, at this time, I guess it was a similar issue. Wearing hose equals gay, I guess. This friend was a huge help for her learning to accept my wearing, and my friend was able to convince my wife that I wasn't gay and I didn't want to dress up and or become a woman. This process took a couple of years, so I think it must have been around '07. At this point, she told me she was okay with seeing me wear tights and hose and wanted to wear it home and if I wanted to wear it home without pants over them, it was okay. I jumped at the chance and started wearing in front of her a couple of times a week as to not push it too much all at once. FYI, at this time I have 3 kids, a boy at 5, 2 girls that are at 3. Also around this time I started traveling to California often for a week at a time I took this opportunity to experiment with wearing publicly during the day at this time. My legs were never very hairy, but I started using a clipper to trim my leg hair at this time, and it helped with the look. This continued for a few years, which was really good for me emotionally to be able to express this part of myself without the risk of running into anyone I know. In addition, California is a socially progressive state, and in my mind, it was easier to wear publicly than, say, Cleveland. I'm not sure that this is accurate, but this is how I thought. Throughout the time, I never hid my wearing from my kids, and they never seemed to be curious or ask me about it. Also, during this time, I started doing graphic work for Steve Katz. Hmm, interesting turn of events. I pretty much did all the graphics for his active skin, then comfort on site. Oh, howdy do. This really helped my wife understand that there were enough of us out there that there was a company making pantyhose and tights specifically for men. Although I worked for the company, I never really was happy with the quality of the product and didn't buy slash wear much of them. If you remember when the graphics all look like this was my work, and I will post the graphics for everyone to see. Fast forward to 2016, I decided to tell my wife I wanted to start wearing sheer hose with shorts in public, but I wouldn't do it if she wasn't comfortable with the idea. She told me she was okay with it as long as she was not with me, and I started wearing sheer skin tone hose with shorts to work daily when the weather was warm anyway. This was at this point that I lost sexual arousal for wearing hose and tights alone. Which, by the way, I will clarify. When I asked about that later, I said, "Did you really lose it entirely?" And he did say that not entirely. So he was being, I think, a little hyperbolic there. And the only reason that I asked him that is I wanted to make sure that he understood that like losing sexual arousal for them is not a sign of like healing, if that makes any sense. Does that make sense, Commodore?
Could,
Could? Or,
could.
okay,
I think what
well,
he was meaning by it is there was a little bit of a question in his mind as to whether or not what he had assimilated or built up in his head wearing publicly, right, would do for him. And once he started doing it, he started to question that because it may not have been exactly what he wanted. Does that
perhaps,
make sense?
perhaps. I think that, and I understand, and the sidetrack, yes, the older you get, you lose the urgency that you have for it when you're, first discovering it. But I think that has more to do with just getting older, period, than any specific connection to a fetish. I mean, the older you get, like the less you think about sex. It's frankly, it's for me, it's been a bit of relief. But anyway, back to our story from O. Throughout this time, he never hid from his family. He also started wearing thick, dark, opaque tights to the gym around this time, and she was okay with me being with me while I was wearing these athletic clothes, which is a step in the right direction. I then graduated to wearing skin tone sheer hose to the gym, this time without telling her. After multiple gym sessions or long walks, we frequently worked out and walked together. She never noticed or let on that she noticed. After a few weeks of this, I told her I was wearing hose the whole time, and she was shocked that she didn't notice. This was a watershed moment in her acceptance and got her to realize either nobody really cares to look at men's legs, or nobody is let's basically said no one cares. Uh, I started wearing nude sheers with shorts pretty much everywhere and without her. I switched from clipping to shaving, and this was in 2018. In 2019 and 2020, things were pretty much the same, except I started wearing semi sheer tights without workout clothes. She never commented. In 2021, I started pushing the envelope by wearing darker, shinier, less sheer hose everywhere with shorts. A few times she gave me the sideways look, but never asked me to change. Her experiencing me out in public with no visible reactions from most people was a big part of her acceptance progression. I would be lying if I told you I never was stared at, but it was not nearly as often as she initially thought it would be. and it also may not have been a negative staring. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's stares are not always, revolting. There could be people who were into it. In October 2021, I started wearing opaque and semi-opaque tights with non-athletic clothes. I didn't tell her to start that I was going to start doing this, which was a mistake, but she was okay with it. The first time I wore semi-sheer tights for fashion publicly was Halloween 2021. I remember the outfit: smoke gray tights, Converse sneakers with jean shorts, and a short sleeve collared shirt. She scowled a bit on Halloween. She scowled at that. Like, that's like it's not really costume, is it? Well, she scowled a bit, but when she saw me come home wearing this, she scowled a bit when she saw me come home wearing this. I asked her if she wanted me to change before we had handed out candy. Surprisingly, she told me it was okay, and I didn't need to. And I can't describe how this made me feel inside when she said this. So this was my quote pantyhose lifestyle for the next couple of years, wearing pretty much whatever I wanted to publicly with the following limitations: no sheer colors other than skin tone or tan, per her request. I realized how fortunate I was to have the freedom, so I didn't push this. Number two, no wearing anything but very sheer stealthy hose with shorts around the family. Her family is very conservative and closed-minded. Surprise. I've worn stealthy hose numerous times around them, and they've never indicated that they noticed. As I posted on Instagram a few weeks ago, the quote, no dark, no colored shears limitations dissolved. I was wearing sheer gray hose around the house, and we were planning to go for a walk to the grocery store. I started pulling the hose down, and she told me, you can keep it on. I'm okay with it. And then that is essentially where we ended it. But some of the questions that I asked was what I found interesting was that they have a bisexual, their son grew up to become bisexual. And I asked, how was her reaction to, that experience? And he said that he came out at dinner when he was 16, and it was like he was just telling about another day at school. It seemed very easy for him, and they weren't surprised at all. They had had their suspicions, and they both accepted it. And I said, well, and I said that's kind of interesting, like she seemed to be okay with that, but the tights thing was a difficulty for her. And he said maybe it was because she expected it. So that's a tricky thing, I guess, to get around because nobody expects a fetish, right? You can't really, like,
I
you
think it was
can't.
because of the fetish, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. And
I
he
think it
did.
was because of his actions doing this while they were growing up led the allure of guys and girls both wearing tights. I want to see or hear if the wife ever wore.
Well, here you go. This is one final thing is wearing how hose around the tights is no longer as arousing as it used to be. However, it does quote unquote aid in both when my wife and I have sex. We both have special pairs we wear during sex that are modified for repeat usage. And yes, she is fine with it because it is expected. And that is that to answer your question, she does indulge the hosiery wearing during sex.
What about
And
outside of sex?
outside of sex? That's an interesting question. I can ask. I don't think that she does wear anything about it. That is an interesting question. And he did want to mention in 2023, in response to a podcast challenging wearers to show their faces online, he took the plunge and did it. At first, I was apprehensive, but it felt great. It was so liberating to be fully out there in the community, more of which is needed to progress in the acceptance of men wearing hosiery as part of daily wardrobe. If others out there wear publicly are listening, no need to hide your faces online. Just go for it. Well, thank you, O. That was a great story. Very thorough, very honest, and left me with an overall feeling of like goodness. But I do think that's an interesting question. I'll ask O and we'll do a follow up. So what are your thoughts, Commodore?
My thoughts are the same.
Excellent. Well, now whose turn it is?
Where's our second one?
You're our second one.
I thought we had a couple fans.
Yeah, you're a Van.
Yes. Oh, I thought you had a second write-in fan.
Well, I'm so sorry to disappoint. You're just tell us your origin story. Come on, what is the origin story of the Commodore?
My origin story is similar to O's, where it started when I was an infant. And so I can remember from the time that I could crawl that I would go and rub the legs of my, let's just say, my cousins or aunts, because this is in the 90s. So pantyhose
Everybody,
yeah, everybody was wearing them. And it would be at every like family get together. And I'd take all my aunts that were wearing them, put them in one room, and then go and like rub the legs all straight down.
what did you
My mom would have to apologize.
you would like pull you would like require you'd like go up and be like, come here, come here, come here, and then
Yep,
like a cute little kid,
yep,
and they're like, oh, what's he up to? What's he up to?
yep.
And then you just
Started rubbing their legs.
you're
From
like,
there, I
that's
knew I
a
had negotiating skills
that's really that is some impressive like game for someone so young.
for an infant.
And are you ever reminded of that? Does that ever come up like at family?
Yes,
Oh
all
God.
all the time. And every time they see that I'm with a girl, she's always wearing, and
Uh-oh. They
they
know.
go, of course, yeah.
That's so
We're
early. That is so early too, because I mean, back when you're that little, there's no hiding it. You're not gonna be able to hide you're not gonna be able to be sneaky about it. So, okay, so moving on next, what would you say when was the first time that you tried them out yourself?
It was during a threesome, actually.
Oh, what year was this?
So I met this couple in 2014 or 15 at a port call in New York
A port
City.
call.
So we got off the ship. I went to this nice bar because I'd always be dressed up. Most people would go out in like raggedy ass, like sandals and flip flops and shorts or jeans with holes. And I would be wearing khakis or a suit and tie. Well, occasion I was wearing a suit and tie, walked into a really nice bar that no one else could get into because they weren't dressed for,
Dressed for it.
6X. And so I sat down at the bar, and I was in the financial district. And so there's one gentleman sits down next to me. We just start bullshitting and chatting. And then probably about an hour and a half later, his girlfriend's been texting him, and he has her come in to come join us. And she is uh, like curly brown hair, blue eyes, hourglass figure, red dress, black hose.
So
And
just
I,
basically a nightmare to look at, is what you're saying.
yeah, just a nightmare, absolute
Yeah,
nightmare, something I would never want to ever be with.
not a
And
fantasy.
so my eyes go right to her. And I said to my buddy, I was like, she's a catch and a half. And he goes, that's my girlfriend.
You're like, oh,
I was like, I'm like, kudos to you, man. She's a looker. And he goes, yeah, what else do you think? And I said, she's got a great pair of legs. And he goes, really? I'm like, those pantyhose are great. And he goes, it's funny that you mention that. So she comes over, we all start drinking a bit more. And one thing leads to another. It comes up to, let's have a threesome. And I said, sure. And he goes, but the caveat is we all have to be wearing pantyhose. And I said, is that your thing or her thing? And he goes, her thing.
no.
Yep. And I said, okay, not
Do
a
you believe
problem.
that? Do you believe that they
I
weren't
do.
both into it?
I mean, he was definitely into it, but I'm sure there are some women that have a serious pantyhose fetish. They're few and far between, but when you find them, it's like a gold mine because they're more open minded than anybody.
Yeah, what's interesting is that she sent him as the like the bait. Like, you know what I mean? Like she
Could have
sort of
been,
was
I
like,
don't know.
but she was like the final like it's an it's interest usually enough. Like that's just it's a very. I mean, it worked out though. I mean,
I mean,
it
it worked
was.
out for me. So that was the first time that I wore, and I swore that it'd only be for threesomes. But then I wore two other times, and that was to meet up with a girl that had pantyhose fetish.
Hmm.
And so she only wanted me to wear them. And I said, that's fine. So we met at Foxwoods Casino, and that was over in Connecticut. And then I met up with one in Boston. So those are like, and then for another threesome. So probably like five times in
Are these
general that I've worn.
the threesomes with the two girls? Was it
No,
like
no, those were one on ones. And then I had
wait, threesome were one on ones?
no, the two there was I'm sorry, there were three occasions that I was with three different nylon fetishes
Oh, okay, gotcha.
and then two threesomes.
And a partridge
So a
in a pear
total of
tree.
five. And a partridge in a pear tree.
And were the other threesomes were they with two females or was it the devil's threesome?
The first one was a devil's threesome. The second one was two females. She brought her friend over to get her to experiment. And it was actually pretty fun to like sit down and we both teach her. So it was like I had met this girl at a bar, as is tradition. I meet these people at bars, like really upscale bars, like not
That's
not a dive bar, not a
that's
bar where you're wearing jeans. Like these are like high class bars that you go to, and that's where I'm meeting all these folks.
that is where people usually meet though. Like if you're gonna be looking for that kind of hooky uppy, I mean a bar is not a bad place to try.
No, not at all.
But upscale is
But for
better.
like,
That's
but for
interesting.
like my like, yeah, for what I'm looking for, it's usually at the higher class bars.
You are classy. You're
Classy
classy.
broad,
Classy
very
broad.
classy broad.
Mm-hmm. So you ever have any experiences like with O where you had like experiences where people out and out shut you down for the fetish where like that like his first girlfriend in college that shut him down and just was like not interested. Had you gone through that too?
No, I've actually had great success. And so I don't know if that's because I'm really good at pitching the ideas or I'm just an alpha in the relationship. But every single girl that I've dated, they didn't initially wear until I either asked or demanded of them to do it, and they did.
Do you know that's what one of our fans called you? They wrote and they were like, I like the new alpha host. I was like, alpha.
Alpha, beta, zeta. So the last girl that I was with, oh my God, like blonde hair, blue eyes, 6'4", right? And I'm no tall guy.
Short King is what they call him.
Yeah, pretty much. And it
Which I
was I found her at a event that I was working, and I was like one of the few guys that did not mention her height at all.
oh right.
And so she loved that. She loved that I could make her laugh, and we just kind of hit it off from there. And I told her probably about the third time that I met her that I had a thing for nylons. And the next day, she showed up wearing thigh highs. And we met up for coffee, but the coffee place was closed. So I just spent an hour rubbing her down. Shit you not. And she loved it. And
Um,
ever and then from there on we dated for about 6 months and she was buying pairs upon pairs of hosiery. Like every time I come over to her house, there was a new shipment of them.
wow.
Like all
Wow.
in all, I think she bought like over 100 pairs.
Good Lord. And I'd imagine knowing you, Commodore, they were not no nonsense.
No, there's a place called, I think it's called the Tight Spot,
Hmm.
and it's like they have like some of the top brands, but they're
Yeah,
not like overly expensive.
it's a British site, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I've shopped there before.
Like they
It's
have some good brands that like I definitely approve of.
maybe, Tight Spot, we should sponsor. Maybe we should hit them up, Tight Spot.
Yeah, it's
Get a
something I
little
can,
code.
yeah, right. Get them to listen to the podcast and see if they'd be interested in sponsoring.
At least, yeah, maybe get the head Tight Spotter on here. See who or he or she is.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Do
That
that.
actually wouldn't be a bad idea, especially since I've sunk in enough money into them.
I think we've all sunk some money into Tight Spot. I mean, there's three really like there's only like three kind of sites that you can really get it at, or even two. I think it's that's Shapings and Tight Spot. They're really the only ones that I've
Hmm.
noticed. There is a really good one that's called Stocking Showcase that's here in Florida, which is great for me because literally you order it and it arrives like the shipping's like $4 and it arrives the next day. It's
Oh
like
wow.
yeah, that's a huge benefit, but I don't know if that would work out as well for everybody else. But and then Pearl and Poseidon's down here too, but charged
Yeah. It's too
like
bad.
$40 for a bodysuit that like it, come on. Like y'all know you fuck them those things one time and there's gonna be a run.
Yes.
Like
Well, like let's see here. Before I left for Boston, I met a girl, and we met just on the street randomly, and she has a huge pantyhose fetish, and she's very much into like Comic Con and cosplay, which I was like, okay, yeah, I'm down.
dude, there are a lot of those at the cons. I was just at a con a couple of weeks ago. Let me tell you, you can't swing an arm without running. It is not a far jump. Like
No,
most
it's
people are
not.
looking for half a reason to do this, like to wear it in public.
It's true. It's very true.
So that's another thing. So everybody out there who is having a hard time, get it, and if you are a nerd, which I have a feeling there's a good amount of people who listen to us that are nerds. I think pantyhose fetishes and nerdism. It doesn't seem like a far cry from one another. It's a the Venn diagram's pretty big. Say,
Well, just take Comic Con as Halloween times. What? There's 18 events in 18
yeah, it's
different cities.
huge. It's huge. If you're too daunted by that, um, if you're into Magic the Gathering, I was just in Chicago. That was great. They have smaller cons too, horror cons. So like if because I know that Comic Con can be difficult to even get into. Like they sell out
Hmm.
like within minutes. So if you guys have if you have any questions about that, yeah, hit us up and we'll let you know. But so you met this girl on the street. She was a convention goer.
No, no, no. I just met her randomly walking down the street. She was pretty. I went up and I introduced myself. She was wearing black tights. So I immediately was like a heat-seeking missile, like right to it.
You're just
And
cocksure. Look at that. You're just like brazen.
I know exactly what I'm looking for.
Man, I'm jealous of you in that sense that like you can't do that being gay. You just can't. Even if you
Why?
know, huh?
Why?
Well, because if you approach a man on the street, number one, he's probably not gonna be wearing black tights, but even if he was, you just can't assume that they're gonna be like down for it. Like there's not a lot of broad daylight approaching of gay men, if that makes any sense. Like,
Well, up where I'm at, there are plenty, and they all congregate up in a place called Cap Hill.
well, there's there's gay ghettos, yes, but most
The GGs.
most of the places that aren't getting most of the places that aren't gay ghettos, i.e., the rest of the world, that's just not something you could do. I mean, there have been times where I have connected with somebody in a public setting, but it was like a party. or something like that where it's like
Well, how'd
not
you meet the last boy toy that we had on?
grinder. That's how I meet all of them. Grinder, grinder, grinder. I mean, and it's just I like Pantyhose King is my profile name, and there's pictures of me in pantyhose, and it's great because even the guys who are like, who would never admit it, they know that if they write me, they're not going to get shunned. So I get anybody who's even interested, and sometimes like I'm like, that's a catch. Unfortunate is that they do not tend to be long lasting. It's one night only or two night only events. That's usually how it goes because they're either married or they're visiting or they have bisexual panic, you know, or they get it out of their system. And then,
Right.
you have the people who then about 6 months later when they get full moon horny, you know, they write. And there's this one guy, okay, this is shameful. Okay, so he was 24 when I first turned him on to pantyhose. Like it was his first time with a guy, and I was very gentle. And I know that's young, and that is as young as I'd go. Like I don't do anything younger than that because I'm not looking to get in trouble. But a year passes, and this little junior mint writes me up. He's like, "I want to hook up again," and out of nowhere, like motherfucker turned into like a bodybuilder, and like he came over, and I was like, "What? What happened?" He was like, "Am I like being too demanding in bed?" I was like, "Listen, you could tell me to do anything and I'll be fine with it because of what you look like." I was like, "I have no problem." I was like, "You want to be tickled in pantyhose? I'll tickle you in pantyhose. I don't give a shite. You look like a fucking Marvel hero." Like, I'm like, what was that song? Your body is a wonderland. It's like that's how I was feeling, except no bubblegum tongues because that's the grossest thing I've ever heard. Is like candy
Mm,
lips and your bubblegum tongue. Somebody's tongue tasted like bubblegum. If you were making out with a girl and her tongue tasted and felt and had the consistency of bubblegum, how revolted would you be? Or would you just chew on it?
I don't know.
I think I might
Depends on
actually.
what type of bubble gum.
Wrigley's? I don't know, like that 6 foot, the 6 foot one kind that they used to have back in the 90s.
Oh God, yeah. The
The
roller
baseball
gum
kind.
or the tape gum.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
fruit. Everything in the 90s was by the foot. It's like so gross. Fruit by the
yeah.
foot.
Fruit by the foot.
Eat
Yeah.
anything by the foot. It's so
Or the
gnarly now.
fruit roll up. There we go.
Fruit roll-ups, those were shit. It was like eating candy wax. But to get back on topic, so what about you? Any your origin story? Anything else you'd like to add about it? Anything? So because we didn't get the ending to the story. So you're in Boston now, and are you currently still in the scene? Like, are you on the hunt for? Are you just looking for booty, or are you trying to land something more long term? What are
I'm
your
looking to land something long term.
yeah?
Wow, it was sunny. Now it's all cloudy. It's a
I think
shame.
that I think that you will land something long term very easily. You seem to be very good at approaching it.
I try.
I mean, I definitely know that I come off as somebody who's very, quote unquote successful with pantyhose hookups to a lot of the guys that write me. They're like, "Oh my God, you're always hooking up with all these guys." But the reality is I'm like, yeah, it's a it's a rotating
Rotating board.
cast. It's
Yeah.
a carousel. And not really as I'm in my 40s, not necessarily what I'm interested in as far as emotional security. So, um, let's just say, like, hey, if we're both not like doing anything by the time we're 65, let's move in together. Don't worry, I won't do anything sexual. I'll cook, I'll clean, and you can just call me your roommate. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, you got to take me up on this, man. So we're both not married by the time we're 65. That means I'll be like ancient because I'm like older than you. So I'll be like 410 when you're 65, and I'll probably die really quick, and you can inherit all my stuff. Huh?
Oh my God, did we just become best friends?
I think so. Yeah. Oh my God, we're engaged to be married in like 60 years.
410 years,
In 60 years, we're going to be married, and everybody can come to the wedding because you're,
or the funeral.
well,
Either or.
it'll be the same thing. We'll do it'll be a double thing. But don't worry, everybody that we would invite there is going to either be dead or dying. So
It's true.
that's a, it's really romantic. I like
If
that.
you really think about it, yeah,
If you really think about it, it's like, it's beautiful. Like, probably everybody will be dead by the time we get married, including us.
could be.
That's beautiful. Well, I think we should end it on that high note because, like I said, my origin story is, it's been said before. If you guys want to hear it, it is, I can send you the links to Strictly Anonymous where I go on ad nauseum about my life as a pantyhose wearer, a gay man, a pantyhose escort, a pantyhose slut, anything that you can think of, I have done. Well, not
It's
anything.
interesting stuff. It's definitely worth a. It's definitely worth perusing.
Yeah, peruse it like thoroughly. And after you're done perusing, don't forget to like and subscribe here because we likey and subscribey. And if you want to join our Patreon, there's lots of fun stuff going on. Uh, Tonight, Commodore has the titty tassel dance that he's going to be doing. Just kidding, that's not happening. But oh my
Ooh,
God,
titty tassel dance.
that would be such a draw. But there are
Honestly, be more like a comedy than
uh,
anything.
well, I'm see maybe to you, but you've got fans. Just saying, you've got some fans out there. I've gotten some letters. People,
Yeah, I gotta
people.
go. I gotta get back to working out again. I just have not been in the mood to work out these last couple of weeks. It's just I don't know what it is. Like I had this drive, and then I just flat out lost it.
I think honestly, that's just like how it's like life happens, and then you just sort of get derailed. We should like, do you want to make like next time we do a podcast, should we like do a like must look buffer than last podcast? And if we don't, something bad happens. Like I don't know, we have to throw away our favorite one of our favorite pair of pantyhose or something, or not wear pantyhose for like a week or something, or whatever your version of it is. Like not talk to a pantyhose wearing girl when you see her on the
That
streets.
that would be the worst. Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. I'll do a challenge. We'll do a challenge. We're gonna be buffer next time we record.
What's the next? When's the next episode?
There will be enough time for bufferage, I'd say. Like we'll like I'll leave enough time. Like what like at least a week at least. You can get a pump up in a week.
And get puffed up in a week.
Yeah, and you can always take what the kids are taking these days. Oh my God, all the children on steroids. I'm like, man, you don't want to be taking Trent at 13, Junior. It's not a good idea.
Kids aren't the brightest these days.
I don't think kids were ever bright. I mean, after all, I kept hiding my pantyhose in the same spot the same way O did. It's like you get done jerking off and you're like, just gonna stuff it here because I don't want to move because I'm about to pass out. And then you forget about it, and then your mom finds those crunchy,
Crusties.
crunchy. I will say that when my mom eventually kept outing me for wearing them, I did eventually, when she finally kept finding them, and I got creative. I got creative. It was not just under the bed. Then I would hide them in a briefcase underneath my drawers, like underneath my sock drawer. Found it there. And then I literally put it in, I taped it inside of a t shirt, of like a Tommy Hilfiger t shirt, and hid it in the very end of my closet. And my mom's a snooper. And when she found that one and she goes, "What is this?" I did say, "What the hell do you think it is?" And that was the end of it. She never looked for anything again. I think that's when she realized, yeah, like, what am I doing? Like, why do I? She's like, "What do you want me to say, Mom?" Yes, I wear pantyhose, Mom. Is there anything else you'd like to know? I think she was like expecting me to be like, "I wear pantyhose and I'm also gay and, and I don't do drugs." And, she wanted like all the confessions, but I did not, I didn't take that well because it was just like, lady, stop it. I had to write my journal in my own secret language because my mom would read my journal. So when I get into a fight with friends, I'd call it like the Battle of the Dragons. We'd be having family dinner. My mom would be like, "So, like, if like you were like read like something like Battle of the Dragons, what do you think that would mean?" I'm like, "Mom, not even subtle. Not even subtle. Well, Commodore, that's all I have to say. So I look forward to seeing you next time. And please, listeners, if you got a story to tell, we're here to tell it. If you want me to read it, if you want the Commodore to read it, or if you want to read it yourself, it's your call. And thank you for joining us again today.
Thank you guys. This is always a privilege and an honor.
And scene.